I'm Scott with Serkworks Art Labs, and this is Making Comics 101. This is another bonus issue, and if you've been watching this for a little while, this series, then you know the drill. What we do is we've got a proper issue, which kind of we go into, all the nitty-gritty of a particular topic. And then with a bonus episode, we dive a little deeper than that. So this is a companion to the last episode we did, issue 3, which was all about world building. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna dive a little deeper into world building. I'm gonna show you my world building process. And in doing so, I want to develop a character. So as well as the world that character inhabits. Now, we're piggybacking off a little bit of our previous bonus episode, which was tied to the 6 questions, the who, what, when, where, why, and how. If you didn't see that episode, you can go back and watch that, but it's not required. And the great thing about the way we're doing this is, even though if you want the full experience, there is a playlist for Making Comics 101 you can watch from the beginning, and you can pretty much take it like a course from start to finish. But feel free to dive in at any point. So you can watch this video as a standalone, or you can get the full experience by watching the whole thing. But again, it's not required. So I just want to get that out front on Jump Street. And what we're going to do is, like I said, we're gonna create a character. Now, in the way we're going to do that is we are going to do that with a mind map. And if you've followed me for a little while, you may have heard me talk about mind maps. This is a tool that I use all the time. Actually, this is a template. It's a little hard to see here because it's in like a non-photo blue, but this is part of the Comic Maker Starter Kit, which is free to download. You get on my website, you can get the Comic Maker Starter Kit. It's got a bunch of templates like this for storytelling ideas, and it's got comic book fonts and templates, and everything you can think of. I mean, pretty much anything you need for creating comics. Or if you're really serious about creating comics, there's also a paid version called the Comic Maker's Toolkit. And that's even bigger. It's about 3 times as big. But if you just want to get started, go get that free download, the Comic Maker Starter Kit, and then you will get this in it. And it's a non-linear way of taking notes. So instead of just making a list, it kind of branches off. So it's a little easier to drop things in the middle or move things around or whatever. Here, I'll kind of show you this. This is a mind map, the mind map book. It's by Tony Buzan, and he's sort of, I don't know if he came up with the idea, but he definitely popularized it. And you can kind of see some of the different ways of making, it's a more creative way of note taking. So I use it quite a bit, and that's what I'm going to use for my world building. But you can find probably this book on Amazon or whatever. If I can remember, I'll leave a link. But there's a bunch of information on mind maps on the internet. Just do a search for that. And again, you can get this template. So that's what we're going to be using. Now, I want to create a character, and and again, we're going back, we're building off of what we've already established, some of the stuff we talked about in the 6 questions bonus issue. This bonus issue, again, is going to be about world building. It's tied into the world building episode, issue 3, I believe. And so what I want to do is, I was thinking to myself, remember back in the 90s, if you guys are old enough, guys and gals, if you're old enough to remember the 90s, you probably remember Image Comics. I mean, it was a huge deal. I mean, obviously Image is still around, but when they first launched it, these are some of the original books. And I kind of want to show you something that was kind of prevalent in that time, is that a lot of these creators, they kind of left Marvel and DC or mostly I think Marvel, to create their own hero universes and everything. But a lot of the characters were very derivative of other characters, and this isn't like a slight on that. I love these books, especially back then. But you could see a lot of similarities to certain characters, and for instance, every single one, you've got the big giant brooding guy like the Hulk or the Thing or whatever. You know, Youngblood had Badrock. I forgot this guy's name. Was it Impact? I don't remember. In Cyberforce, but a lot of them had these, you know, these tropes. You know, they've had the big muscle guy, and a lot of them had sort of that Wolverine sort of knockoff, for a better term. You've got here. I'll just kind of show you here. So this is Wildcats. I thought I bookmarked these, and you'll see where I'm going with this in a minute. But yeah, so we got this guy, Warblade, I believe is his name. He's got the giant claws and everything. Even the pose is pretty much the famous sort of Wolverine pose that a lot of people know. So there's that guy. Let's see, I think Youngblood had a character called Cougar. I don't see giant spikes. Maybe they're retractable, or claws. I think they might have been retractable, but there's no mistaking that this guy is very heavily influenced by Wolverine. Of course, you got Cyberforce. Cyberforce had, you know, Ripclaw, and again, the claws, I mean, and another Image Comics Shadowhawk. You know, he's got the claws and everything. So I don't think there weren't too many books, with the exception of maybe Spawn and I think the Savage Dragon, that didn't have sort of the claw guy or the big giant guy. So, you know, but those are sort of staples. They're, you know, kind of cliches, but they're sort of staples, and those are the kind of characters that a lot of people wanted. Now, I wanted to kind of take that same idea and coming up with my own character and base it on a well-known character that a lot of people know. And the thing is, I was trying to think, what's one of the most famous comic book characters ever? And there's one that is super famous that there aren't really very many characters that are derived from that character in the same sense that we saw like the Wolverine or the Hulk, you know. And so what are some famous characters? So we could go with Superman. Superman, probably the most well-known comic book character. There are a lot of other iterations. You know, even back in the days, there was, you know, the whole Captain Marvel, the Shazam Captain Marvel, and Superman. There was the lawsuit because they thought it was too similar. So there are a lot of iterations of Superman. Batman, probably maybe the next most famous. A lot of, you know, you could argue that, you know, Moon Knight is Marvel's Batman, or even like Daredevil. But there's a lot of characters like Batman. But the one that, you know, obviously who's the next most famous superhero character you can think of, and that would be Spider-Man. But you know, there's not a lot of characters that are sort of inspired by Spider-Man in the sense that, you know, the web slinging and because it's those powers and everything, they're so specific to Spider-Man. You can't really imagine those in any other character unless it's some other character that's part of the Spider-Verse. You know, like a Gwen Stacy, the Spider-Gwen, or like the Miles Morales Spider-Man, or some other part of that Spider-Man universe. So I wanted to create my own type Spider-Man character. So how do you create a character like Spider-Man without him just, you know, being almost part of that Spider-Man universe and totally, you know, and just totally ripping something off whole cloth where it's obviously, you know, would be probably a major copyright infringement. So that's what I'm going to try to do with this, and so let's figure out how we're going to do this. All right. So what we're going to do first is we're going to use a mind map, and we're going to kind of go through it, and we're going to figure out what makes Spider-Man Spider-Man. So right here in the center, and it always starts in the center because it's kind of like it's like a family tree or something. It kind of branches off. So our main topic is going to be our hero. It's going to be Spider-Man. So we've got Spider-Man. Now let's think some of the traits. What makes Spider-Man? So we got, all right, so we got our traits. Let's go with like powers and personality. So we got the different traits. Spider-Man is personality. So what are powers and personality? So Spider-Man, you know, he's quippy. He's let's see. Well, these are let's maybe for our purposes, we're not going to get too much on the personality because we only have so much time. So what we're going to do is branching off from powers. Let's think of what are some of Spider-Man's powers. So we've got his we're going to connect this here. We got Spider Sense. He's got, you know, of course, he's got strength and speed, agility. So we put those all together. That's just kind of his, you know, that all kind of goes with strength and everything, or his, you know, powers. So he shoots webs. And he, let's branch off here again. He crawls on walls. So those are some of the main things, some of the powers that Spider-Man has. What are some other things? Now, because we're not just concentrating on the hero, we also want to think about the world. This is all about world building after all. So let's see. So what's Spider-Man's base of operations? Excuse my spelling. So let's see. So basically, it's New York. He's New York City. So what do we know about New York? Okay, we've got like skyscrapers. We've got, you know, alleyways. And it's like a metropolitan area. So that's what we know about New York. And we can go off of here. We can make another offshoot over here. His origin. His uncle killed. That's kind of what sparks everything. He didn't stop the killer. That's part of it. But the main thing as far as his powers, he was bit by a radioactive spider. All right. And we can go into, like, if we want to also branch out over here, his costume. So we've got the colors. He's red, blue. It's got kind of webs on it. I would say, more than most heroes, it's skin tight. You know, it's basically a bodysuit. There's not a lot of there's no capes or other things. It's one of those characters it's one of those costumes that's so iconic that you change it too much and just it doesn't become Spider-Man. Like you'll see, like in the movies, where they'll try to change a lot of characters because it's like, who's gonna be running around in printed pajamas, basically, with a hood on it. So with most characters, they will try to change things around, but they don't do that so much with Spider-Man because you will lose so much. So it's a very iconic costume. So that's what we know about Spider-Man. And we're gonna use that. We're gonna bring out another mind map here. And we're gonna start building our own characters based on what we've sort of established there. All right, so where do we start? All right, so let's think of what is really, cool and original and iconic about Spider-Man. I think the fun part about him, other than his personality, his quipping and telling jokes and stuff and all of that stuff, one of the things that I think the thing that makes him, really interesting is just him swinging, the fact that he can shoot webs and swing from skyscraper to skyscraper, and there's really a lot, with that. Now you can have I mean, characters like Batman has like a grappling hook and everything and can kind of swing or whatever, but it's not quite the same. It's not like from one building to a next and this, you know, like Spider-Man, he's just weaving in and out, and that's really cool. And it's something that not a lot of other heroes have. So I was trying to think, are there any other heroes like that? And there's one that I can think of that predates Spider-Man even, and that is Tarzan. Now, obviously Tarzan doesn't shoot, you know, webs or anything like that, but he does swing from vine to vine and he's in the jungle. So I was thinking, what if we combine sort of a Spider-Man and a Tarzan? And in doing so, we're gonna need to change our settings around a little. So let's start with that. So in order to have a character that is a combination of Spider-Man and Tarzan, whereas before we had the home base of New York City, so let's see, we got the home base for us, or the setting, you can call it the setting or whatever. We talked about this before in the previous bonus issue, but post-apocalyptic, I don't know if I'm spelling that right. It's a post-apocalyptic setting, but what if this is after, and we don't have to get into how this became, it just, from our standpoint, it just is what it is. But I'm thinking like a city that's sort of, you know, in ruins and everything, but it's overgrown by vegetation and everything, which would allow our character to swing from vines to vines. Kind of like Tarzan, but it would also have that, I don't want to say metropolitan, but like that kind of these decrepit, or not decrepit, but dilapidated buildings and everything with, you know, the vegetation all growing around. I mean, you've kind of seen that in probably other like concepts before, or in real life, how nature just takes over an abandoned area. So that's kind of what I'm thinking here. And that would give our hero an opportunity to kind of swing from vines to vines and everything like that. So we've got, you know, buildings in ruin, overgrown vegetation. So I'm pretty sure you can get the picture from that. Now let's get into our hero. Let's go with some of his powers, because we want him now, because this is the setting. I mean, anyone with enough skill, if they or whatever, could probably swing. Like Tarzan doesn't have any superpowers. He just was raised in that environment, and he learned from the animals how to, you know, swing from trees to tree and things like that. So theoretically, anyone can do that. But we want our hero to be unlike the other character. He has to have an edge to him. So what if he had? Well, obviously, instead of spider sense, he's going to have some kind of animal sense, but he needs to have sort of the ability to control the vegetation, or like the vines and everything, and like, so he could call them to him. So in addition to just swinging from vine to vine or everything like a Tarzan, he could also do what Spider-Man does, where, you know, he could wrap somebody up in webs or whatever, but our character could control the vines and everything to sort of ensnare the villains and kind of, you know, but he's like one with nature, and he can control and call to him these, so we're just going to say one with nature. All right, so he has the ability to conjure up, vines and call them to him. So, it gives him a little more than just the average thing. So he kind of, or we can say controls plant life. And maybe even like he speaks to the plant life. So there we've got our hero. So we've got sort of an original character that's a lot like Spider-Man, a little bit of Tarzan, but it's different. It's different enough. We've given a different setting and something I think that would be visually really kind of cool. Now, of course, we talked about origin. We're not going to get big into that right now. We can dive into that maybe later, or maybe it's not as important. But we need to give our character a name. So, you know, at first I was thinking like something, because he lives in this world and he's kind of like wild, I was thinking like Wild Child, but I think there's already a character like an Alpha Flight villain named Wild Child. So, and I don't know if right now I'm thinking Wild Thing, for lack of a better, and you know, it's not super, you know, I kind of like the old Steppenwolf song, I guess. But anyway, so we can call it right now, for lack of a better name, we're going to call him Wild Thing. But if we were going to make this an actual comic, I think we need something a little catchier. And so what I was thinking, because of the world that he inhabits and what it is, I was thinking of the term for a title of our series. Now, most titles of comic books are named after the main hero of that book, but then what's to say they have to be? So I'm thinking we can call our story Concrete Jungle. I like that a lot. Now, let's see. All right. So I like that a lot because for me, I grew, you know, when I was growing up, I was huge into hip hop, and that was sort of a term that was, you know, prevalent in a lot of hip hop songs and everything. And it basically, I don't know if the first person that may have coined that may have been Bob Marley. There's a Bob Marley song from back in the 60s, but it's like, you know, concrete jungle referring to like the inner city or the ghetto where, you know, it's like a jungle out there, but it's a jungle of concrete. But in our story, there's a little more of a literal sense, because it actually is a jungle and it is within this concrete. So I really like the idea of that. And I don't know if that name is taken as far as a comic book or not, or in this sense, but that's what I'm going to go with for right now. So I really like that, and I think we can, you know, create a really cool story around that, or a really cool character. So, I mean, we can go a little bit in deeper if we want to. We will do, when we get into character design. We're going to come up with costume, but let's see. Right off the bat, I'm thinking, you know, Spider-Man's got those bright. I want him to look sort of like Spider-Man. So instead of the big eyes, maybe he's sort of got, you know, I don't know, maybe like goggles that are in sort of that shape or whatever. Something a little different that Spider-Man doesn't have. I mean, he's got the gauntlets, you know, that sometimes they're under his, you know, depending on what version, you know, well, I think the canon version is that he built those. So there's more towards Spider-Man, you know, as far as we can get into, back to when we were talking about, you know, he's sort of a, I don't know, he's kind of a bookworm, he's a, you know, science whiz and all that. So if we were to get more into our character, and we might, we'll figure all that stuff out, what kind of character our character is. And maybe maybe he grew up in more of like an inner city setting or something like that. We'll get into all that later. But because Spider-Man has sort of the gauntlets that shoots webs, our character doesn't need that because he calls those to him, so it's a little different. But I would like him to have either maybe some gauntlets, or like a, you know, utility belt, something like that. And then instead of, since he's kind of a wild kind of creature, maybe instead of the webs, I want some sort of pattern to him, but maybe, you know, animal stripes. And then we can branch off further. And that's the thing with this template. You can keep branching off and you can do however you want. You don't have to follow. This is just to give you an idea. And if you can't read this, basically what it says is it goes main topic, then ideas, and then it splits to example, and then details. Just in case you can't see that there. So for this, obviously I don't want to go with red and blue because and plus that doesn't really fit our character, but I'm thinking like black and yellow. And since our character is Wild Thing, maybe somehow incorporate, you know, a W or the shape of a W into his costume. So basically I think I'm gonna sort of end it there. I think you get the idea of how we can kind of come up with an idea for a character. And even with this one, even you saw how we took something that was very derivative. I mean, we're purposefully trying to create a Spider-Man-like character, but I think we've given him some originality. I mean, you could say he's like Tarzan, you could say he's like Spider-Man, but if you combine the two, you're creating something that, to my knowledge, hasn't really been done yet. If it has, let me know. But I think this might be an original idea. And the other thing about original ideas is, especially, there's just things that are in the zeitgeist. Depending on how old you are and the things you grew up with, a lot of people will be like, oh, I came up with this idea and somebody else had the same idea. Did they copy me? And it's usually not that they copied you. It's usually that, no, you grew up liking the same thing, so the same influences are likely to render sort of the same creative results, at least similar. So, you know, just that whole thing about copying people and original ideas, there's really nothing original, but I think we have come up with something a little bit different. So anyway, that's just showing you how I use mind maps to world build. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, let me know in the comments section. If you like this idea, I don't know if I will continue it as like a series, as sort of fun exercise, but I will take this character and we will further develop this character within this series and kind of see where it goes. And we'll even create maybe like maybe a 3-page story based on this character and everything, based on what we've created here, what we created in the previous bonus episode. So I'm looking forward to seeing kind of what happens with this character. But anyway, so that's going to do it for another bonus issue of Making Comics 101. I will see you guys later. That is all. Hey, thanks for watching. If you like what you saw and you want to see more, hit that subscribe button. Also, you can follow me at Serkworks on social media, and now you can support the work that I do on Patreon. Do you like making comics? Then go to Serkworks.com and pick up the Comic Maker Starter Kit. It's packed full of fonts, brushes, templates, and more. And best of all, it's totally free.